get the tension would come up, and the masturbating have to go get forgiveness. Well, you learn what to be guilty of, and the church is the one that teaches you what to be guilty of. And then once it's given you the disease, masturbation is terrible, premarital sex is wrong, once it's given you this guilt disease, then it says, just come to church, pray, come to confession, read your Bible, go to Sunday school, and you can get washed away of your sins. So you masturbated, pray, you had sex with your boyfriend, pray, read the Bible, and we can forgive you. Now the interesting thing is, think about this. Have you ever heard of a Mormon confessing their sins to a Catholic priest? Have you ever heard of a Catholic confessing their sins to a Baptist minister? No. You only get forgiveness, relief from the guilt, the place you learned the guilt in the first place. It's a cycle. It brings you back to the religion you were infected with in the first place. That's why sex is so important to all of the major, especially patriarchal religions. It doesn't work as well with the pagans or Wicca, but it's worked really well for the Baptists, the Muslims, the Mormons. Patriarchal religions are consumed with controlling women's sexuality. That's the primary focus. Why women? Because women are the ones that have the children. Women in most cultures, almost all cultures, have primary care of the children. Women are going to infect their children with the God virus as well. So, once you're infected with it, you're going to pass it on. Mothers to daughters, daughters to their daughters. Yes, you're going to pass it on to sons, but you may have noticed all patriarchal religions have a double standard. One standard for the males and one standard for the females. In Iran, you stone women to death for adultery. In Iran, you might just get a slap on the wrist if you had sex outside of your marriage. And especially if you went out of the country to do it and then came back. But if a woman went outside the country and had sex and came back, she'd be stoned to death if they caught her. So there's huge double standards among patriarchal religions. So I said earlier, masturbation is a biological imperative. So religion says, we could use that. If I make you feel guilty about religion, then you got to come back and confess to us. It's something you're going to do anyway. Our Catholic priest example, he could only resist it for about 60 days, then he had to come back to the Catholic Church to get forgiveness. Same thing is true for you. You were taught probably masturbation is wrong. When you did it, then you felt guilty. You had to go back to church. You had to pray about it, read the Bible, or whatever. But I'm here to tell you, masturbation is great. Here's the deal, guys. You are the best sex partner you will ever have. You were the first sex partner you ever had, and you will probably be the last sex partner. You may be the last sex partner you ever had. So get used to it. Enjoy yourself. Your body is made for enjoying. If you can't enjoy your own body, nobody else is probably going to be able to enjoy it either. When I was in clinical practice, I would have women come in to me and say, 40-year-old women say, I've never had an orgasm. So the first question I would ask was, well, can you get yourself an orgasm by masturbating? And invariably they would say, oh no, I can never masturbate. Well, why? Well, because my church says it's wrong. So in other words, you aren't going to make yourself have an orgasm through masturbating, but you expect your husband to do that? You can't do it yourself, but you want him to do it. And that was the kind of logic that comes in from religion. Make women, make men feel ashamed of their bodies, and it really infects the entire relationship. It infects it in so many different ways. So I asked, well, do you think your husband masturbates? Oh, I'm certain he doesn't. Well, have you ever found pornography in your house before? Oh, yeah, but it was our teenage son that brought it in. Well, I'm sure of that. I mean, they have all sorts of excuses to justify or to deny or to look the other way on this stuff. What I found in my research, if you want to go online and look at the research I mentioned earlier, we found that pretty much all religious relationships are based on a lie. A high percentage. Who knows? 95 or more. And here's what I mean. How many people came into my office for marriage counseling? And I would let one step out so I could talk to one alone, and let the other step out so I could talk to the other alone. And I would ask, did you have sex before you were married? Well, yes, but I can never tell my wife. Or yes, but I can never tell my husband. Well, if I brought him back in right now, could we talk about that? Because it seems to be bothering me a lot. Oh, no, I could never do that. She would divorce me. He would divorce me. So in other words, the very basis of your relationship is a lie. The minute you got married, the minute you said I do, you were lying. Because I told, all these people say, I told my husband, I told my wife, I'd never had sex before. Now the same people had children. And when their children grow up, they come into my office and they say, I can't talk to my daughter, my son, about sex. Well, why not? Because they might ask me questions. Well, what kind of questions? Well, like, did you have sex before marriage? Well, did you? Well, yeah, but I couldn't tell my kids. Why not? Well, because I'm telling them they can't have sex before marriage, and I did. So you can't be honest with your own children. Right, I can't be honest with them, because I don't want them doing what I did. Well, did it hurt your marriage? You've been married for 20 years? Whatever. Well, I can't talk like that. I can't do that. I mean, think of the lie after lie after lie religionists base their entire relationship on. It has a profound effect on their relationship over time. Sooner or later, it eats away at the trust. And then somebody acts out. The wife finds her husband's using pornography, or the husband finds his wife's online having online sex with another woman. I mean, something happens that violates their, quote, morals. And it's just the whole relationship blows up. And I see this in my own office. I've seen it for decades. And in other places as well, not just in my office. So, for guys, for you, masturbation keeps the pipes clean and the inventory fresh. Remember, sperm only lasts 5 days. If you're not getting it out of there on a regular basis, you got old sperm, they won't work very well for getting the egg. So you got to keep it flowing, guys. At least every, I don't know, once a day, twice a day? Certainly twice a week. So go for it, guys. The other side is, ladies, your masturbation is important for most of you as it is for guys because it keeps the sexual response good. It actually makes the lining, it actually helps invigorate and the circulation of the lining of the vaginal tract, so you're much healthier. And if you're masturbating, you're learning about your own body, you're satisfying yourself, and you can then turn around and teach your partner how to satisfy you as well. There's lots of benefits for masturbation and having regular sex. Here's Science News report. It says for animals that produce sperm continuously, such as man, the implications seem to be that the more frequent ejaculations serve both to remove older, thus less viable sperm, as well as to reduce the damage to sperm cells during storage. Because sperm do die inside your reproductive tract, guys, just like they die once they get into the female reproductive tract. With women, orgasm, there was a rather interesting study of 1,800 women, and they found 30% of women said they use sex or masturbation to go to sleep. Now, if this is news to you, go home and try it. If it's not news to you, I'm glad you discovered that. It keeps the blood flowing, like I said earlier, and does all sorts of positive things for you and creates a healthier tissue. So, Christian sex. We have allowed the Christians to define what sex and sexuality is. And I'm here tonight to challenge you to rethink what sex is for you and how it fits into your life. Let's not let them define it for us. That's why I wrote Sex and God, to challenge you. In fact, the last 5 chapters, if you read Sex and God and you have a partner, we really encourage you to read those last 5 chapters together, or read them and then talk about them as you go through it. Because it really forces you to rethink some of the ideas that you probably got growing up. How many of you were raised religious in here? Okay, I guarantee the last 5 chapters will challenge you. The rest of you I'm not so sure about. All right. So I want you to get over some of the ideas that we learned from our religious upbringing, and I want to bring a new framework, a secular framework to human sexuality. And I want to celebrate positive, natural sexuality among us. We don't have to follow the Christians. I'm not a Christian. I don't have to act like a Christian. And I want to encourage us to be open about our sexuality, kind of like the gay community. You may have noticed gays don't give a shit anymore. I'm gay, I'm going to be out. If you don't like it, that's your problem. Well, that's kind of the way I am as a secular sexual. I'm out. I'm not gay. I'm straight, but who cares? I'm not going to apologize for having multiple sex partners, for example, for having premarital sex. I'm not going to apologize for masturbating. Now, you Christians can apologize for masturbating. That's your problem. I'm a human, normal human mammal, and that's what we do. It's just the way we function. So let me reframe this for you. You know Jeff Foxworthy, and you might be a redneck if. Well, imagine this. If you might be a Christian atheist, if you feel guilty about masturbating. You might be a Christian atheist if you feel shame admitting you use pornography. You might be a Christian atheist if you have difficulty talking to your children about sex and sexuality. Why would you have difficulty? There weren't some religious ideas about sex and sexuality. In our own research, we found that 13% of religious parents talk to their children about sex. And that's about in line with national surveys have shown. But when we looked at the comments of those 13%, what we found, yeah, they said they were talking to their children about sex, but what were they really talking about? Condoms don't work, abstinence only, don't go out on a date if you intend to have sex. I mean, that's what they're telling their kids. Religionists are telling them. Secular parents, we looked at secular parents, and what we found is secular parents, 38% of secular parents are talking to their children about sex. 38% is pretty bad. That's pretty lousy. But it's a lot better than 13%, and we looked at what they were talking about, and they're talking about condoms work, use birth control, get tested. I mean, they were doing all the right things secular parents were. I would just like to see that 38% go up to about 99.5%. And many of you are going to be parents. Take a lesson here. Talk to your children about sex when they come of age. You might be a Christian atheist if you have difficulty talking to your spouse or partner about sexual fantasies you would like to try. Now, hold on just a second here. You can't talk to the person most important in your life, the most intimate person in your life. You can't talk to them about sexual fantasies or things you'd like to try. Now, I'm not saying your partner has to do them or participate, but that's only done, consensually and with some enthusiasm. But if you can't even talk, something is really wrong. And I'm guessing it's probably because of some religious sexual programming or shame that you've gotten early in life. You might also be a Christian atheist if you feel disgust around normal sexual activities. I have a lifelong atheist friend who simply cannot do cunnilingus on his wife. He says, "Where'd you learn that?" I asked him, "Where'd you learn it?" "Well, I learned it from my very devout Methodist mother. Told me it was terrible and, gave me all these horrible ideas about it. Just can't get over it." Well, this guy's been an atheist since he was 14. So his wife has to have a boyfriend to give that to her outside their marriage. With his full permission, by the way. He's very happy that he gives her that. So, you might be a Christian atheist if you shame other people, especially women, for being sexual. And one of the things that pisses me off the most is when I go online and I see secularists, primarily males, sometimes females, shaming other people using sexual language where it has no bearing on the argument. Shaming people for acting the way they are. Shaming for people for expressing opinions. And we have some of that in our community. I hope there's nobody in this room. But what people in this room can do is when you see that kind of behavior, you can get right online and you can shut it down. You can tell people that is not appropriate. Slut shaming is not something any secularist should be doing. Let the Baptists do that. They're really good at it. But we should not be doing that kind of behavior. So, I'm not a Christian. I don't have to act like one. I'm trying to create a new meme, if you will, and I want you to think about this meme tonight. I'm calling myself a secular sexual. Think about it. What is a secular sexual? Secular sexual. Secular sexual is somebody who lets reason and science, love, empathy govern the way we interact with other human beings. Whether we're actually in a sexual relationship with that person or not, we still need to, we can use humanistic values as a secular sexual and celebrate other people's joy in their bodies, joy in their relationships, joy in the way they develop themselves sexually. Now, many of you are still in college and young, so you got a lot to experiment with. All I would say is be safe about it, be open, be consensual, be enthusiastic. There's lots of things for you to learn and explore about your sexuality. The opposite side is religious Christian sexuality. It's no mistake that the most religious states in the United States and the school districts that use abstinence-only sex education have the highest teenage pregnancies and the highest sexually transmitted infections of anywhere in the United States. They also have the highest abortion rates. Now here's a trick question. What's the most religious group with the highest abortion rate in the United States?
Mormons?
Pardon?
Mormons?
Mormons. Nope. Catholics? Nope. Nope. You won't guess it because it's kind of strange, but black women. Black women are by far the most religious group in the United States, and they have the highest abortions. Now, this isn't racism because right behind them, the second most religious group in the United States is evangelicals, and they have the second highest number of abortions. The second most religious group and the first most religious groups in the United States have the highest number of abortions. It kind of goes along with the data we saw earlier on porn searches and things like that. We see that when people are repressing their sexuality, they tend to deny things. They tend to not do things they should, like use condoms, like discuss the relationship, like get tested. There's things that people who are religious don't do because they have to deny their sexual being. And biology still happens. They still express their sexuality. All right, so I am a secular sexual, and I'd like you to consider that for yourself. I'm not a Catholic sexual. I'm not a Baptist or a Mormon or a Muslim sexual. I'm a secular sexual. And explore what that means for you. And explore some of the things that might be hiding in your own psyche that prevent you from really enjoying your partner or enjoying yourself. Thanks a lot for your attention tonight. But I'm happy to answer a few questions. Yeah.
You mentioned like religious principles. I was wondering about, I think a lot of people look to religion as a source of like to answer ethical questions they might have regarding their sexuality. And I was wondering, what are good sources of information like that for secular sources?
Well, I think there's a lot of new books coming out that are pretty darn sex positive. And there's been several out for many years. Have you read The Ethical Slut? Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a place to start. Now, it's written by two lesbian polyamorous couple. They've been married for some decades, actually. Well, married in the emotional sense, not in the legal sense, I guess. But they're out in California, I think. Anyway, they wrote a great book. But the book's about communication in relationships and openness about sexuality. There's another book by Tristan Taormino. Don't ask me how to spell that. Tristan Taormino. And she's written a lot. In fact, her whole website's worth looking at, Tristan Taormino. And her book is called Opening Up. Dr. Marty Klein's got a new book out, just came out about 3 months ago. I think it's probably the best thing. I would put it number 1 on that list. I should have started with that one. And it's called Sexual Intelligence. He also has a newsletter he sends out every month, I think it is, or every 2 weeks, I can't remember. And the newsletter is worth subscribing to. Dr. Klein is an acquaintance of mine. I won't say he's a friend because I haven't known him that deeply or long. But every time I've ever met him, I'm amazed. He's a sex therapist out of San Jose, California. And his experiences are extremely deep and very well, his therapeutic approach is very well informed, I think. Pardon? Marty Klein, Dr. Marty Klein, yeah. Sexual Intelligence, that's the name of his book. That's also the name of his newsletter. But the book's recent. The newsletter's been around for 10 or 11 years. And I'm happy to say that he gave me this Sexual Intelligence Award of the Year just last month. Been giving me award for 13 years. So, yeah. So is that good enough for you?
Yeah.
Of course, if you get online and kind of look around those same books I gave you, you might see some others that I didn't think of. Yeah.
Mine was a biological question about sex during pregnancy.
About what?
Sex during pregnancy with the great apes. Are humans the only ones who do it, or
sex during pregnancy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, bonobos still have sex during pregnancy. Yeah, and I think the chimps do. I don't know that it's not a problem. I mean, it's not a problem with humans. It's not a problem with bonobos. Maybe the last month or so. I mean, it's part of its physics. But up at that point, it's not a big deal. I know my wife and I had sex until the 9th month, and the only reason we stopped was because she thought it was causing her too much discomfort. Not because she wanted to stop, because we got 2 great kids out of it. And, oh, by the way, have you ever heard of partible paternity? Oh, okay. Remember I told you the second best book on sex was Sex at Dawn. That's another one put on your list, by the way. There's 46 cultures in the Amazon out of 128 cultures that believe in something called partible paternity. It's a really fascinating concept. If you were just an Amazonian primitive scientist, and you were looking at the animals in the forest, in the Amazonian forest, you would notice that a lot of females mate with a number of males before they have babies. So Peccary will mate with 3 or 4 males before she has a litter of babies. So as a primitive scientist, you might assume that it takes multiple males to make healthy babies. So these 46 different cultures believe that. They believe it takes multiple males to make a healthy baby. If you only have sex with one male, you're going to have a sickly baby. So you've got to continually feed the baby semen throughout the pregnancy in order to have a really healthy baby. Now, we laugh at that. But, you know, it was only recently we figured out what actually caused pregnancy, sperm and egg mating and that sort of stuff. So it's a fairly recent idea, this idea of how reproduction happens in humans. So if you understand that the world, if you believe this, that it takes multiple men to make one healthy baby, it has a second byproduct, actually repurposes in some ways. Instead of having one father, in a society where male adult mortality rate is very high, you're very likely that your biological father is going to die before you're 30 years old yourself, or much younger. Now, instead of having one father, every man who had sex with that woman during that time period is now considered a father by that culture. So you'll have 3 or 4 fathers, all interested in making sure that you survive, you get plenty of food, that you're nourished. It's a really interesting thing. But when you think about Catholic sexuality or Baptist sexuality, they don't want to talk about the fact that other cultures really look at sex very different from us. Whether it's biologically correct or not is irrelevant. It's different. And most religions have the Quran is useless as a biological text. The Bible is useless as a biological text. There is no biology in any religion I've ever seen of any depth. Yeah.
There are a lot of things that secularists say to justify certain behaviors, like, well, it's really natural to see that in the natural
It's
world.
what now?
There are many things that secular people will say, well, this is really natural, so natural is good.
No.
But there are many
That's a naturalistic fallacy.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And there are many aspects of human sexuality that most of us would say, this is not good. For
Right.
example,
Right.
sexual jealousy, and mate guarding, and
Yeah.
so forth.
Right.
How would you say that a secular response to these sort of natural but ugly aspects would there's something to say about that?
Well, that's actually a very excellent question. One of the better ones I've gotten recently, and I can't answer that in one. I've got a whole chapter just on that thing, because I'm going to challenge the whole idea of it being natural. For example, jealousy. I think jealousy is not natural. We have tendencies towards certain feelings, but when I say I'm jealous of my wife, I've told you zilch. I've told you nothing. If I say I'm concerned my wife might leave me with the kids and I have to raise them, that's a legitimate concern. If I say I'm concerned that my husband's going to leave and take the resources with him and live with another woman, that's a legitimate concern. So what we do is we take these fears. Fear of abandonment is one of them. Fear of betrayal. Those are legitimate fears, and we label them jealousy. In the book, I talk about let's get rid of the whole idea of jealousy. Get rid of that. It's not natural. We aren't naturally inclined, and I totally disagree with Stephen Pinker on this one, because he thinks it is natural. Now, as a cognitive behavioral psychologist, I see you can break these things down into component parts, and then you can deal with them in a rational way. That's a humanist response to things like jealousy. And I'm not saying people shouldn't be upset if their husband leaves them with the kids and no financial resources to live with somebody else. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's not jealousy. It's you've been abandoned. You've lost resources. You have a right to be upset about that. But let's not label it jealousy. You can deal with the components better than you can this nebulous thing called jealousy. What's jealousy to you may be totally different from me. Ask any three people with jealousy and you get three different answers. Not well defined. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah.
Read the chapter. You'll get a lot more on that. Yeah.
Circumcision.
Against it. Against it. And whether it's male or female. And I don't equate the two. I mean, absolute female genital mutilation is horrendous. Totally against that. But yeah, I don't see any reason. There's no medical reason for it. Oh, I have a photograph. It was just, where was that? I traveled some. I was in Akron, Ohio, which they have this. You notice I wear glasses. Okay, didn't even get the joke. I'm sorry. You know, in the old days they said if you masturbate, you'll go blind, right? So I'm in Akron, Ohio, speaking of the SSA in Akron, Ohio, and up here on the hospital, there's this big sign that says the Kellogg Eye Clinic. Kellogg Eye Clinic. Now, do you know who's responsible for circumcision in the United States? Dr. Kellogg of Kellogg's cereal. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, he went on a rampage saying boys should not be masturbating. If you circumcise them, it'll make it painful and they won't do it as much. So start masturbating your start circumcising your boys, and it took off. And by the 1920s and 30s, the vast majority of boys in the United States were being circumcised. In the 1800s, it was almost unheard of. Christians did not circumcise. Jews did, but not Christians. But Kellogg of Kellogg cereal was the one that started that whole thing. I wish I had put that up, but it's Kellogg Eye Clinic. It's just grand. So I saw another. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, but I'd like to say also as an artist, I think that an actual target is a lot more interesting than the single bullseye. So as a commentary just on the aesthetics of it, I just think it doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
The pain and the
Right.
and the
Right.
lack of choice.
But here's how strong it is. You have I have some Jewish friends. Well, they're cultural Jews. They're both atheists. And their parents are atheists on both sides. They're Jews, but they tell us in synagogue, but they're atheists. When they had the grandchild, they refused to circumcise the grandchild. It caused major disruption in that family for 6 months. Nobody talked to anybody else because they didn't circumcise her. And they're all atheists. Don't take it. Yeah, back there and then.
I was going to ask you about abortion, because I've been reading a lot of pro-life religious arguments lately. I'm not sure I agree with them, but what they say is that they're not really anti-sex as much as they think the fetus is the same as a person, therefore abortion is murder.
Well, they all want to try to define, they slowly define penis back to the, we have a new law in Kansas, I don't know if you saw it. The new law is that conception begins when a man buys lingerie at Victoria's Secret. I mean, that's the stupidity of this. You can slice and dice this. No, there's not. And they always make partial birth abortion the main focus. Well, it is incredibly rare, and if it is, like recently, a woman in, Alabama was refused or persecuted, I can't remember, for wanting to have this partial birth abortion. Well, yeah, the baby was 8 months, but it has no brain. There's no brain inside the skull of this baby. So why make her go through a potentially life-threatening pregnancy when you could go ahead and abort it now?
Yeah, and nobody really agrees. You know, if I asked everybody in this room, when did the fetus become perfect?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, the minute the egg meets the sperm, God puts a soul in it.
So there's no more debate, right?
Right, no more good. John?
I got a couple of comments about what you said about circumcision, and I don't dispute what you said about the origins of why circumcision is popular in the United States.
Yeah, right.
It's something that has to do with anti-masturbation hysteria, I think. But there have been some recent studies on circumcision in Africa, and there is good reason to believe that circumcision is something, male circumcision, I'm talking about the female stuff,
Right.
is something that results in males being at less risk for HIV infection.
Yeah.
And there's still some controversy about exactly what the mechanisms are in regard to that, but the study conclusions are pretty clear. So there may be reasons to circumcise over and above all the other kinds of
Well, the interesting thing about that research is nobody's been able to replicate it.
it's a pretty large scale study.
It was. And it was pretty poorly designed at the same time. You know, literally, there's been a hell of a lot of criticism on the whole design of the thing, and it has not been able to be replicated in the United States.
Well, it may not be replicable in the United States. I mean, there may be some
Right.
Some factors that have to do with hygiene and things like that that are factors.
Well, why not just teach guys to use condoms? The Catholic Church is saying,
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying there's still some controversy about circumcision, and
Yeah.
particularly in other countries.
what I've read is that study's been pretty strongly debunked by some United Nations groups that have taken a second look at it. I could be wrong on that, but I also know that they don't find it anywhere else on the planet.
There's some people with a vested interest in,
Yeah.
that was all there.
Yeah. And, still, my view is, if it's my body, I should have the choice.
Well, I agree with
My
that.
parents did not give me the choice, and it pisses me off a little bit.
Well, I think it's cosmetic surgery for most people now.
In Sex and God, I write about my father. My grandmother wasn't very religious because she kind of played around and got married, had a baby, got divorced, and remarried the only guy I knew was my grandfather. And to the day she died, never admitted she'd been divorced. And never admitted that the man I knew as my grandfather wasn't really my biological grandfather. So, that's the situation. My dad gets to be, when my dad gets to be about 10 or 11 or 12 years old, she gets Jesus big time. She gets really, really religious, as does my grandfather, and they are fanatics for the rest of their life. They really get bad cases. Fundamentalist Christianity. So what's my grandmother do? She forces my dad get circumcised at 12 years old. 12 years old, circumcised. And my dad couldn't even talk about it. It was just totally emotionally traumatic for him. And I think it scarred, I know it scarred him for the rest of his life. The interesting thing is, the Christians, literally, emotionally scarred him. The thing about it is, Muslims, it's not, some branches of Islam say the male should be circumcised, but they don't circumcise at 8 days like the Jews do, or the Christians do. They circumcise at 12 years old. So boys in the Islamic world are being circumcised at 12 years old. And I mean a large proportion, because a large proportion of Islam thinks circumcision was a commandment from Muhammad. Some say it's not, but there's debate in that area. Just like there was in early Christianity, whether men should be circumcised or not. Paul said, no, they don't need to be. That's the same kind of thing. One more question, and let's wrap it up. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier how some of your clients who were religious, but sometimes it was had strains in their marriages. And I was just kind of wondering, how do you go about that? I'm just interested because I kind of want to go into counseling when I'm older. And is there ever a point where you overstep your boundaries, or like how do you handle that?
Well, as a psychologist, I'm trained to be pretty neutral about things like that, but just ask questions in a Socratic way. If you ask the right questions, people will come to their own conclusions. You have to be real careful not to inject your values into the lives of those people. Not that that doesn't happen occasionally. I'm human, and like any psychologist might do. But after you've done it for enough years, you kind of get really good at not injecting your own shit into other people's
No, that's the quick answer for it. The long answer is if you become a therapist, be sure and register at the Secular Therapy Project. We need secular therapists then. All right. Well, I guess are we going out afterwards?
Might do.
Well, what's the plan? That's what I'm asking.
We've got snacks still. Darrel can sell some books or sign some books if you brought some that you already own. I'm not sure what the...
We'll wing it after that.
We'll wing it after that. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Let's take our guest